In the quiet shadows of the Bayan Har Mountains, you follow the soft breath of the wind across ancient stones. Beneath your fingertips, the rock feels older than time itself, holding stories no language remembers. You breathe in the stillness, feeling the patience of the earth. Somewhere in this silence, the Dropa Stones begin their long, slow whisper. You stand at the edge of the Bayan Har Mountains, the air so still that you can hear your own heartbeat. It is late evening, and the sun is folding itself into the horizon. In quiet layers of gold and ash blue, the world feels suspended, as if it too is holding its breath. Here, in this thin, high air, every sound is softer. The wind does not rush. It glides, brushing against the ancient slopes like fingertips over worn paper. Each breath you take tastes faintly of stone and snow. Somewhere beneath your boots, far below the roots of the grass and the skin of the soil, there are secrets older than the tallest peaks around you. The ground here is not just earth, it is memory. You walk slowly, letting your body match the rhythm of the landscape. Your footsteps are steady, deliberate, the kind of pace you keep when you are not in a hurry to arrive anywhere, because being here is already the destination. Each step presses into the soil, and you imagine it sinking just a little deeper into time itself. Your hand drifts to a wall of rock rising beside the narrow trail. The stone is cold, and its surface is a puzzle of cracks, ridges, and faint lines, worn by centuries of wind and ice. If you close your eyes, you could almost feel it, breathing a slow, unhurried breath, so deep and steady it seems to carry the pulse of the earth. It is here, in these mountains, that whispers of the Dropa Stones first began. Long ago, explorers spoke of small, round discs found in hidden caves, stones unlike any others in these valleys. Some said they were carved by human hands. Others believed they might be older than human memory itself. But the first time you hear of them, it is not in a textbook or a lecture. It is in a story told by an old man in a tea house. His voice, so quiet you lean forward to catch the words. They were found, he says, where the mountains hide their oldest dreams. That image stays with you now as the evening light drapes itself across the peaks. You picture a cave mouth, hidden in shadow, where cool air carries the faint scent of dust and stone. Inside, you imagine the walls glinting faintly in torchlight, and in the dimness, rows of discs, resting like sleeping moons on the cave floor. You keep walking, the path bending gently upward. A bird crosses the sky above you, its wings slicing the air in slow, sure strokes. Somewhere below, a stream murmurs to itself, carrying meltwater down toward valleys you cannot see. Every sound here feels deliberate, placed with the care of a brushstroke in a painting. It is this quiet that draws you deeper into thought. You think about how the earth holds its history, not in pages, but in layers, stone over stone, grain over grain. Each layer is a chapter, pressed together by weight and time, each holding a story we can only guess at. The Dropa Stones, they say, are one of those chapters. When you finally reach a ridge that looks out over a sweep of darkening peaks, you pause. The mountains seem endless, their silhouettes folding into one another like waves in a black sea. You feel the smallness of your body here, but it is not an uncomfortable smallness. It is the kind that makes you aware of being part of something larger. You sit on a flat rock, its surface warmed by the day's sun, but cooling quickly in the evening air. You let your palms rest against it, feeling its quiet strength. This rock has been here long before you, long before any village or road or even the stories of the Dropa Stones began. It will likely still be here long after, as the last light fades. The colors of the world shift into softer shades, pale silver where the moonlight begins to touch the snow, deep blue where the valleys drink the shadows. The first stars appear, shy at first, then bolder. You look at them and think of the legends tied to the Dropa Stones, tales of visitors from the sky, of journeys across vast distances. But tonight, those legends are only part of the picture. Tonight is about the stones themselves, resting in darkness, their spirals waiting like a poem yet to be read. Some scientists dismiss them as nothing more than shaped rock, the product of erosion or simple tools. Others see them as a puzzle that doesn't quite fit into the patterns we know. But here, in this quiet place, those debates feel far away. The stones are not asking you to decide their meaning. They are only asking you to listen. You close your eyes. The air is cooler now, brushing your skin like a whisper. You imagine the cave again, the discs lined up in patient silence. You imagine running your fingertips over their surface, feeling the grooves that wind inward like rivers spiraling toward a hidden center. You imagine the cool, smooth weight of each disc in your hands, as if it were holding not just stone, but time itself. There is something comforting about the thought that the earth can keep a secret for thousands of years and still offer it to anyone willing to walk far enough, listen long enough. You breathe deeply, the mountain air filling your lungs. Somewhere in the dark, an owl calls, its voice low and deliberate. It echoes softly between the slopes, fading into the distance. And in the space that follows, in the hush after the sound, you almost think you hear it, a faint, slow murmur rising from beneath the ground. Perhaps it is only your mind arranging the quiet into a pattern. Or perhaps it is the beginning of the story the Dropa Stones have been waiting to tell. The moon clears the ridge, its light pooling over the mountains like water. In that silver glow, the land seems to exhale, and you with it. You rise slowly, your body moving in rhythm with the stillness. The path ahead is darker now, winding into shadow. Somewhere beyond, hidden among the folds of rock and time, there may be a place where the first stone rests, the first whisper in the long, slow language of the mountains. You take one step forward, then another. Each footfall is a promise to keep listening, because the stones have waited this long, and perhaps tonight they will begin to speak. And as you walk deeper into the mountain's shadow, you begin to see them in your mind, the faint circles in stone, winding like the breath of time itself, waiting for your hands to trace their shape. You trace the spirals carved deep into the surface, delicate grooves winding like rivers of memory. The pattern feels familiar, like the gentle loops of your own breath. The more you look, the more it seems the stone is speaking, not in sound, but in shape. You wonder how many nights the mountains have kept these circles safe. You step into the mouth of the cave, the air cool and damp, carrying the scent of untouched years. Your footsteps echo softly against the stone walls, the sound dissolving into the darkness as if the space is swallowing every note. Here, light behaves differently, hesitant, almost shy, stretching thin fingers into the shadows but never quite reaching the farthest corners. Your hand brushes the rough wall, guiding you forward until the surface beneath your fingertips changes. The stone grows smoother, more deliberate, as though it has been touched and retouched by patient hands. And then you feel it, the first shallow groove. It begins as a gentle curve, barely noticeable at first, but as your palm travels along it, the line deepens and loops back, forming a perfect, unbroken spiral. You crouch, tracing it with your fingertips, feeling each rise and fall of the carved path. The grooves are worn, softened by time, yet they remain distinct, their pattern undeniable. You lean closer, letting your eyes adjust to the dim light. The spiral winds inward, circle upon circle, until it reaches a small, smooth center. It reminds you of the way ripples gather around a single drop of water, falling into a still pond. There is a rhythm to this spiral, a gentle repetition that feels almost alive. You follow it again, slower this time, your finger moving with the same steady patience as the hand that once carved it. The touch brings an unexpected awareness. Your breathing has begun to match the curve, each inhale expanding outward, each exhale drawing inward. You realize the pattern is not just something you see, it is something you feel. There are more discs here, half buried in dust, some leaning against the wall, others resting flat on the ground. You brush away the fine powder of centuries and find more circles, each one a little different. Some spirals are tight and fine, their grooves as thin as a hair. Others are broader, almost like rings of a tree, each layer wrapping around the last dot. You think of the rings in an ancient cedar trunk, how each one marks a year, a season, a rhythm of growth. Perhaps these stones hold a similar record, not of a tree's life, but of something else, a calendar of the sky, a map of a journey, or the turning of years in a place where no one writes in ink. The air here is still, heavy with a sense of being watched, though not in a way that makes you uneasy. It feels as though the stones themselves are aware of your presence, not judging, not asking, only noticing. Asterisk, you sit cross-legged on the floor, one of the smaller discs resting in your lap. Its surface is cool against your skin, and its weight is balanced, neither too heavy nor too light. The spiral draws you in again, your eyes following the path inward until it seems you could fall into it, as if the center were a doorway to somewhere else entirely. Outside, the world is full of noise, engines, voices, the constant hum of human life. But here, in the company of these silent shapes, there is only the steady pulse of your own breathing. You let it slow, feeling the air fill your lungs, finding grooves so fine they appear almost etched by machines. Others dismiss the spirals as the work of simple tools in the hands of ancient people with time and patience. But sitting here, the debate feels distant, almost irrelevant, because whether the grooves were cut by human hands or by something far older, they hold the same quiet power. They are proof that someone or something cared enough to mark the stone with a pattern that would outlast centuries. Your gaze drifts to another disc lying nearby, its spiral interrupted halfway through. The line shifts, bending into a smaller circle that rests inside the larger one, like an eye within an eye. You tilt your head, wondering what it means. Perhaps it's a symbol of a star and its planet. Or maybe it's nothing more than the carver's whim on a long night in the mountains. You place the disc back gently, its sound against the floor barely more than a sigh. Your fingers find the edge of another, larger stone. This one's grooves are wider, and between each ring you notice faint dots, small depressions placed at uneven intervals. They could be nothing, or they could be a code, a count, a measure of distance or time. The more you look, the more you see. And the more you see, the more questions unfold. You think of the way the human brain loves patterns, how it can find meaning in clouds, constellations, and even the grain of wood. Perhaps the circles are meant to spark that instinct, to make you search, to make you listen. Your breath fogs in the cool air, curling upward before dissolving into the dark. Somewhere deeper in the cave, a drop of water falls with a faint echo. You imagine it landing in a small pool, sending out ripples that mirror the shape under your hand, circle after circle, reaching outward. Time here feels different. The minutes stretch, slowing into something you can almost touch. You wonder how many nights the mountains have guarded these stones, how many storms have passed overhead, how many winters have wrapped the peaks in snow while the discs slept quietly below. You picture the first person to find them, kneeling as you are now, brushing away the dust to reveal the spiral beneath. Did they feel the same sense of stillness? Did they hear the same unspoken question? You realize that you are no longer just looking at a carving. You are part of the same long chain of gazes, of hands, of quiet hours spent tracing circles. In stone, the stone in your lap holds steady, its center fixed while the rings turn outward, each one carrying your thoughts further away from the present moment. You imagine following the spiral not just with your eyes, but with your mind, winding deeper into the pattern until the rest of the world falls away. Outside the cave, the night must be deepening, the stars scattered brighter against the black. You think about the shape of the Milky Way, how from a distance it curves like a slow spiral of light. Maybe that is why the circles feel familiar. Somewhere inside you, your body knows this shape. It is the coil of a seashell, the curve of a galaxy, the turning of a storm, the loops of your own breath. You set the stone aside gently, feeling the slight ache in your fingers from holding it. The cave seems quieter now, as though it is waiting for your next move. You stand slowly, brushing dust from your palms. There is more to see here, more to understand, but not yet. For now, you carry the memory of the spirals with you, their slow turning imprinted on your mind like the afterimage of a candle flame. Asterisk, and as you move deeper into the cave, the circles remain with you, not just carved in stone, but circling quietly within, leading you toward something smaller, finer, hidden in the grooves themselves. Asterisk, within the thin grooves, so fine they could be mistaken for a hair's shadow, lies something astonishing. Scientists call it micro-engraving. You might call it the handwriting of time. Under magnification, the spirals reveal a language too small for the naked eye, like a whisper folded into the grain of sand. You walk deeper into the cave, the air growing cooler, the floor shifting to smooth stone beneath your boots. The light from your small lamp pushes back the darkness only in a fragile circle, the rest of the chamber remaining untouched, as if it belongs to another time entirely. Ahead, you see it, a stone lying slightly apart from the others, its surface, catching the dim glow in a way that draws you forward. You kneel beside it. The spiral is there, as in the others, but this one feels sharper somehow, more deliberate. Leaning close, you notice something unusual. The grooves are impossibly fine, narrower than the edge of a leaf, the kind of detail the eye can almost see but not quite focus on. You blink, trying to sharpen the image, but the lines seem to shimmer just out of reach, as if they belong to a scale too small for naked sight. You've read about discoveries like this, the way some researchers brought fragments of the Dropa Stones into the bright precision of a laboratory. Under the gaze of a microscope, those delicate spirals changed. What had looked like smooth channels revealed themselves to be built from even smaller lines, so thin they could hide within the thickness of a strand of silk. A micron, you remember. The measure, a single millionth of a meter. To the mind, it is almost an abstraction, a number so small it slips through thought like water through open hands. But here, in the cave, you can feel the reality of it. You imagine the unseen ridges and furrows beneath your fingertip, smaller than the smallest grain of sand, yet carved with intent. You wonder what could shape stone in such a way. Your breath clouds faintly in the lamplight. You close your eyes for a moment and picture a scientist leaning over a microscope, adjusting the fine focus until the blur resolves into patterns, tiny, deliberate marks running the length of the groove. Some describe them as symbols, others as sequences of dots and lines, not random scratches, but something ordered. Perhaps you think it is like the grooves on a vinyl record, storing sound as shape. Only instead of music, these spirals might hold a story, a record etched in the language of geometry. You rest your palm against the disc, feeling its coolness. In the quiet, you imagine traveling down into that groove, becoming so small that the walls of stone rise like cliffs on either side. At this scale, the surface is no longer smooth. It is a landscape of ridges and valleys, an entire world folded into the curve of the spiral. It is humbling, the thought that something so small could carry meaning across thousands of years. Some geologists, skeptical of the Dropa Stones' mystery, say the microgrooves could simply be the result of natural wear, the slow and random touch of wind, water, and time. But others argue that the precision is too consistent, too purposeful to be an accident. You find yourself lingering in that space between certainty and wonder, where questions feel more alive than answers. You trace the spiral again, slower. Now, the movement feels meditative, each turn drawing your focus deeper inward. The lamp's light pools on the disc, catching in the faint ridges of the groove, hinting at detail you cannot fully see, but can almost sense that it reminds you of the way tree leaves hide a network of veins beneath their surface, invisible from a distance, but perfectly ordered up close. Nature often hides complexity in plain sight, and perhaps this stone does too. The air around you feels thick with stillness. You imagine the first hands that carved these grooves, whether human or otherwise, and the care they must have taken to shape each micron-wide channel. You think about the patience required, the way such work demands a mind fixed on something beyond the present moment. And then a thought comes, gentle but persistent. Who was meant to read this? If the grooves are a message, they were carved for eyes, or tools capable of seeing far smaller than yours. Perhaps not for you, but for another generation. Or perhaps for no generation at all. Only as a way to mark existence itself. You lift the disk carefully, feeling its balance, the faint shift of weight in your hands. You tilt it toward the light, watching the spiral catch and release the glow. It is beautiful, yes, but also unsettling in its precision. Beauty, after all, is not always accidental in your mind. The micro-grooves become threads, countless threads, each one holding a piece of the story. Together, they weave something vast, like an unseen tapestry curled into the shape of a circle. You cannot see the whole of it from here, but you can feel its presence outside the cave. The night must be very deep by now, the stars sharp in the high mountain air. You think about how the sky itself is full of messages in microns, the light of distant suns carrying information across the vacuum of space. Each photon a tiny courier crossing the dark to arrive in your eye. The stone, you realize, is not so different. It has been carrying its message for thousands of years, waiting for someone to notice the way its grooves narrow into the invisible, waiting for someone to lean closer and closer. You set the disk back in its resting place, letting your fingers rest in the shallow center. The coolness seeps into your skin, and for a moment, you feel as though you are holding something alive, not in the sense of breath and heartbeat, but in the sense of continuity. This stone has been touched before. It will be touched again, and in that it lives. Your lamp's light wavers as the fuel inside shifts. Shadows move across the walls, bending over the scattered stones like silent watchmen. You stand, your knees stiff from kneeling, and take a slow step deeper into the cave. You do not know yet if the message in microns can be read, or if it was ever meant to be, but you carry the awareness of it with you, like the aftertaste of a thought you cannot quite put into words. Somewhere in the dark, there may be a stone whose grooves are sharper still, whose spirals hold not just patterns, but meaning you can almost understand, and so you keep walking, your hand brushing the wall, your footsteps quiet against the floor. And as you move forward, the air seems to shift, as if the cave itself is guiding you toward a place where the stones are no longer silent, but bound to the people who once shaped them. The elders of the Bayan Har Mountain villages never spoke quickly when asked about the old stories. Their eyes would cloud over, as if peering into a memory that did not belong entirely to them. It was said that before the snow, before the great wind carved the mountains into their current shapes, strangers had come from the sky not as conquerors, but as wanderers. These strangers were small in stature, their limbs delicate, their heads disproportionately large. They did not speak the language of the valley, yet somehow they made themselves understood. The villagers called them the Dropa, name that, over generations, would become tied to legend and fear alike. The Dropa had no weapons, no claim to land. They carried only strange discs of stone, etched with markings so fine they could barely be seen with the naked eye. The villagers did not understand these discs, only that the Dropa guarded them as if their lives depended on it, but not all welcomed them. The mountain tribes feared what they could not explain. Over time, hostility grew. The Dropa were forced into the caves, deeper and deeper into the mountain's frozen heart. The elders said they had tried to send a message scratched into the stones themselves, but no one then could read it. Some whispered that the Dropa never truly left, that their bones were still entombed within the hidden chambers, their discs scattered like seeds, waiting to be found. Others swore they had seen lights moving high in the peaks during winter storms, stirring silent, slow, as if searching for something they had lost millennia ago. And whenever the winds howled through the passes, the elders would lower their voices and say, "They are still listening." The stones glimmered faintly under the beam of Li Chun's flashlight, each spiral groove catching the light like the rings of an ancient tree. He turned one slowly in his hands, brushing away the last grains of dust. For a moment, he could almost imagine the tiny etchings pulsing like heartbeats frozen in mineral dot. Professor Wu leaned over, her voice hushed, almost reverent. "Do you know what this could mean? These grooves, they aren't random, they're precise, impossibly so, like they were carved by Hunzor tools that understood both astronomy and vibration at a scale we can barely measure." Li frowned. But who? The Bayan Har caves were never part of any known empire. The people who lived here, they were mountain tribes, isolated. Wu didn't answer right away. She simply reached into her satchel and produced a thin, transparent film. When she placed it over the stone, the patterns aligned perfectly with a star map, not of our present night sky, but of the constellations as they appeared 12,000 years ago. Li's pulse quickened. "That's impossible." "Impossible," Wu said softly, "is a word we use when we don't want to face the alternative." The cave suddenly felt smaller, as if the very stone walls were listening. A faint, cold draft whispered through the chamber, and somewhere deeper inside, a sound like falling pebbles echoed. But Li swore the sound was rhythmic, deliberate. The stars continued their silent dance, the same constellations the Dropa Stones had recorded long before history began. For decades, the Dropa Stones were dismissed as an obscure oddity from the highlands of China, an archaeological curiosity best left to dusty shelves and academic footnotes. But as time passed, the strange discs began to resurface in unexpected places, thousands of miles from the Bayan Har Mountains. Similar carved stone circles, etched with spiraling grooves and cryptic markings, were reported in deserts, jungles, and even beneath the sands of Egypt. It started with an unassuming find in Peru. Archaeologists excavating an ancient burial site uncovered a thin stone disc, weathered yet unmistakably marked with tiny grooves spiraling toward its center. The measurements were eerily close to the Chinese artifacts, though the cultures had supposedly never crossed paths. Weeks later, a geologist in Namibia photographed a similar object embedded in a rock face, the spiral worn but still visible in the late afternoon sun. The strange symbols, though weathered, bore an uncanny resemblance to the Dropa script, tiny, delicate scratches as if made by tools far finer than stone chisels. Scholars tried to explain it away. Coincidence, they said. Cultures separated by oceans often develop similar motifs. But those who studied the Dropa stones more closely noticed something unsettling. These spirals and symbols seemed to align not just in appearance, but in meaning. The language, when partially translated, spoke of journeys across great dark seas and silvercraft descending from the stars. Even the proportions of the grooves matched almost as if they had been carved by the same hand or the same advanced technology, thousands of years apart. As more artifacts surfaced, a quiet network of researchers began sharing their findings in secret. They mapped the locations where these stones appeared, overlaying them on global star charts. To their surprise, the sites formed geometric alignments, vast, deliberate patterns, visible only from above. The lines traced constellations, pointing to star systems long beyond the reach of ancient human navigation. Whispers spread in the late-night corners of the internet. Were these disks not isolated relics at all, but fragments of a much larger message scattered across the planet? And if so, why had the same message been left in so many places? Was it meant for the people of Earth, or for someone else who might one day come looking? The more the patterns emerged, the more it seemed as if the Dropa Stones were not just history, they were coordinates. And those coordinates were beginning to point somewhere no one was ready to go. The Dropa Stones had by now become a lightning rod for debate. In universities, dusty lecture halls echoed with the clatter of theories, some born from rigorous science, others from whispers of the extraordinary. To the skeptics, the stones were nothing more than misinterpreted artifacts, products of a culture we hadn't fully understood. To the believers, they were fragments of a lost chapter in human history. Proof that we were never truly alone. Radiocarbon dating results had been maddeningly inconsistent. Some labs claimed the stones were only a few thousand years old, crafted by early mountain tribes. Others, using different methodologies, insisted they could be over 12 millennia old, dating them to a time when no known civilization should have possessed such craftsmanship. Microscopic scans revealed spiral grooves far too precise for the rudimentary tools supposedly available in that era. Their depth and spacing consistent across every stone, as though machine-cut still. Academic journals rejected these claims, citing lack of verifiable provenance. The original caves, where the stones were found, were now nearly inaccessible due to landslides and state restrictions, making fresh excavation impossible. Every argument returned to the same bitter stalemate. Claims demanded extraordinary evidence, and what little existed had either vanished or been locked away in private collections. Yet, cracks began to appear in the wall of doubt. In 1998, a physicist in Switzerland claimed to have detected unusual isotopic compositions in the stone's ratios that didn't align with known terrestrial rock formations. His paper was quietly retracted weeks later, with whispers that funding pressures had forced him into silence. The conspiracy-minded called it proof of suppression. The scientists called it poor methodology. To the outside world, the Dropa Stones were a curiosity-odd archaeological footnote, but to those who had held one in their hands, felt the cool weight, and traced the perfect spiral under their fingertips, there was an unshakable sense that the stones were speaking a language we had yet to learn, and somewhere, buried beneath the noise of arguments and ridicule, that language was waiting for someone to finally listen. The wind that night was not the same wind that had greeted us when we first arrived. It carried a strange heaviness, like it had been blown through centuries before touching our skin. Above, the sky was cloudless, yet the stars shimmered in ways I could not name, some brighter, some faint, others seeming to flicker out and reappear somewhere else entirely. We had the Dropa Stones laid out in front of us on a tarp, each disc lit from the side by a dim lantern. Their grooves caught the light, forming shadows that curled inward like miniature whirlpools etched into stones. I ran my fingers over them, and for the first time I noticed something odd. The spirals weren't perfect. Each one had a barely perceptible shift, a curve that tightened at intervals, as though marking some kind of acceleration. Professor Keon sat opposite me, silent, his eyes reflecting the stone's ridges. "They are not calendars," he said finally, voice low. I looked up. "Then what are they?" He hesitated before answering, almost afraid of the words. "Records, but not of time as we understand it." The Dropa did not think of time as a straight line. For them, it turns back on itself. He reached for a sheet of tracing paper and placed it over one of the discs. With a charcoal stick, he followed the grooves, careful and slow. When he lifted it, the pattern looked unmistakably like a spiral, but one that looped outward, then suddenly in again, then out once more. He tapped the page. Each loop marks an era. Civilizations rise, collapse, rise again. Disasters return in patterns. Encounters repeat, always in cycles. I wanted to dismiss it. The mind naturally resists the idea that history is fated to repeat itself, but I could not stop seeing the similarities in the loops. One loop was marked by a cluster of fine dots, as though representing a star system. Another carried a symbol eerily close to an ancient sun glyph used in petroglyphs thousands of miles away. Keon leaned in closer. "The next contraction," he said, "is soon." I swallowed. "How soon?" He shook his head. "Soon enough that the Dropa thought it worth leaving a warning for whoever would listen in this cycle." As we spoke, the air seemed to change, not in temperature, but in texture, as though it was pressing against us. From the mountains came a deep rumble, not from wind or earth shift, but from something far older. I turned toward the sound, and for a moment the horizon looked wrong. The mountains seemed doubled, one faint set of outlines overlapping the real ones, shifting slightly, as if I was seeing two moments in time at once. Keon's voice trembled as he whispered, "The spiral is tightening again." And just as the lantern flickered, I had the sudden, terrifying thought, maybe we hadn't discovered the Dropa story in our time at all. Maybe this was their time repeating itself. The high plateau was silent that night, the kind of silence that seems to lean in and listen. Above the jagged ridges, the sky unfurled in infinite darkness, studded with stars so sharp they felt close, enough to touch. It was here, the elders had said, that the sky visitors had first descended, long before anyone living could remember. Legends described them not as gods, but as beings of bone and light, wrapped in strange fabrics that shimmered like water. They had come down not in fire, but in silence, crafts drifting like seeds on the wind, glowing faintly against the cold void. The Dropa people, small and fragile in the thin air, had been terrified at first, but the visitors had not spoken in anger. Instead, they had traced circles in the dust with slender fingers, marking the same spiral patterns that would one day be carved into the stones in the tails. The visitors stayed for many seasons. They taught the mountain people how to track the stars, how to cut stone so that it would sing when the wind passed over it. They shared knowledge of herbs, metals, and something stranger still, how to remember without writing, by passing images. directly from mind to mind, and yet the visitors had also seemed sad. They often looked upward, toward a particular cluster of stars, as if longing to go home. One winter, the elders said, the sky turned white for 3 days. When the snow cleared, the visitors were gone. Only the strange disks, half buried in the dust, remained. Some believed they had died. Others swore they had simply left, promising to return when the spiral completed. No one knew when that would be. Now, standing on that same plateau thousands of years later, researchers and wanderers alike felt the weight of that absence. The Dropa Stones still hummed faintly under careful hands, and the stars still wheeled in their endless arc overhead. Somewhere out there, perhaps, the sky visitors still looked back, waiting for the spiral to close. The cave was silent, except for the faint drip of water echoing somewhere deep in the shadows. I stood in the circle of my flashlight's beam, my fingers brushing over the grooves carved into the ancient stone disk. The Dropa stone was colder than I expected, colder than the cave around it, almost as if it was holding on to the chill of space itself. When I tilted it, the etched spiral seemed to shimmer faintly. At first, I thought it was my light reflecting, but then I realized the glow pulsed slow, steady, like a heartbeat. My ears rang high and sharp, though I couldn't tell if it was from the pressure in the cave or from the stone itself. The sensation wasn't sound exactly, but more like something bypassing my ears entirely and going straight into my skull. At first, it was just a hum, then words, not in English, not in any language I knew, and yet I understood. They spoke of a journey through the blackness between stars, of a home that was no longer there, of arrival on a blue world that was not theirs. The hum grew louder until it felt like my bones were vibrating. Shadows in the cave seemed to stretch and bend toward me, and I swear I saw movement at the edge of the beam, tall, thin shapes that did not belong in the human world. The last thing I remember before everything went white was the feeling that the Dropa stone wasn't just telling me a story, it was waiting for an answer. The night they returned to the plateau, the air felt different, denser, almost charged, as if the atmosphere itself had been waiting. Every step toward the stone circle seemed to carry a faint hum beneath the soles of their boots, a vibration too steady to be the wind. They had come prepared this time: portable seismic monitors, laser rangefinders, and parabolic microphones set at the perimeter. No one spoke as the equipment powered on. The clicking and worry of calibration was the only sound. Above, the stars burned fiercely, more vivid than they had on any of their previous visits, as if the sky had drawn closer. Dr. Varga was the first to notice it, the low, bone-deep resonance. She raised her hand, signaling silence. One by one, the others felt it too. The stones were not just vibrating, they were pulsing. Each pulse was spaced exactly 7 seconds apart. The seismic data confirmed it. The pattern wasn't random. It was too precise then. Something new happened. From the central slab, the one carved with spirals that no tool could replicate today, came a sound that was not entirely sound. It was somewhere between a voice and a tone, both mechanical and organic. The parabolic mic struggled to isolate it, but the human ear didn't need help to understand. The rhythm was language, not spoken language, but something older, a cadence that seemed to bypass words and settle straight into the mind. The sensation was overwhelming. Memories flickered in fragments that weren't theirs. A river reflecting 3 moons. A city of glass under auroras. A sky filled with shapes that weren't clouds. The pulses grew faster. The hum deepened. And then, all at once, every stone answered. The ground quaked in unison, yet not with violence. It felt almost like coachnalegement. "They're replying," whispered Dr. Varga, her voice trembling, "to something we asked without knowing." And then came the last pulse, long, rising, almost like a drawn breath before the plateau fell silent. The stars above had shifted subtly, impossibly, as though they were no longer in the same night sky they'd arrived under. No one moved, because they all knew, without speaking, that whatever the stones had just said was not meant only for them. Long after the last stone had been studied, catalogued, and locked away, something lingered in intangible vibration that seemed to hum at the edges of perception. Those who had touched the Dropa Stones reported dreams they could not explain, visions of endless deserts under alien skies, seas of stars folding in on themselves, and voices speaking in languages older than Earth itself. At first, the dreams came nightly, then weeks apart. Then, just when the dreamers thought they'd faded entirely, the echo would return, always stronger, always sharper. It was as if the stones had marked them, as if some distant intelligence had taken note of their curiosity and was waiting patiently. And somewhere, in a forgotten vault, beneath layers of dust and neglect, a single Dropa stone began to spin silently without being touched. The spinning stone didn't stop. Hours passed, then days, and the motion only grew faster, though no one was there to witness it. Deep within its grooves, the microscopic etchings began to glow faintly, pulsing in a rhythm too precise to be random. In a monitoring station hundreds of miles away, a technician on the night shift noticed a strange, repeating spike in a frequency no one used anymore, one that matched the hum recorded from the stones years earlier. The signal wasn't just broadcasting, it was responding to something. Somewhere beyond Earth, in the black silence between stars, the reply had been sent, and now something was coming back. The first sign wasn't light, but sound. Every radio, phone, and television, whether switched on or not, began to hiss with a low, rolling static. It wasn't the usual white noise. This static seemed layered, like multiple voices, overlapping, whispering in a language too old for human memory. People described hearing fragments of their own thoughts inside it, memories they'd long forgotten, and in some cases, things they swore they had never experienced. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the static cut off worldwide. In the silence that followed, the message became clear, not spoken, but planted directly into the mind of every living being. "We heard you." And then, without warning, the skies began to move. At first, people thought it was clouds forming. Massive, dark swirls rippled above every continent, moving too deliberately to be weather. The patterns curved into spirals, geometric lines, and shifting symbols, marks eerily similar to the ones carved into the oldest standing stones on Earth. Pilots reported their instruments going dead the moment they crossed into the shadows of these formations. GPS failed, compass needles spun, Some aircraft never reappeared. On the ground, crowds gathered in uneasy silence, necks craned upward. The air felt heavier, as though gravity itself was bending. Then, without any thunder or lightning, the clouds split open, not revealing space, but something else entirely. Something vast and alive. Watching back, no one could agree on what they saw next, only that it was impossible to forget. The village lay in that strange half-light just before dawn, when the outlines of houses were clear, but the world still seemed to be holding its breath. The wind had died sometime in the night, leaving the air unnaturally still, as though even nature was waiting for something to happen. I had not slept, not after what I had heard in the stones the night before. Those low, resonant hums still vibrated somewhere deep inside my chest, not in my ears, but in my bones, in a place no doctor could touch. And worse than the sound was the rhythm. It had felt deliberate, purposeful, like someone or something was sending a message not meant for human understanding. I walked through the narrow lane that cut between the old houses, my boots silent on the packed earth. The villagers, who were usually up early, bakers stoking fires, farmers tending animals, were nowhere to be seen. Curtains were drawn, doors shut tight. Even the stray dogs that always loitered around the well were gone. It felt like the village itself was hiding. As I neared the western edge, where the road met the barren field that led to the standing stones, I noticed faint marks in the dirt. Not footprints, not exactly. They were too long, too narrow, as though someone had dragged something heavy but precise through the soil. The lines ran parallel, perfectly straight, leading toward the stones. The field stretched out flat and dry, the grass brittle from weeks without rain. Every step toward the stones made my pulse quicken. I could see them now, those great, weathered monoliths, their surfaces carved by centuries of wind and rain, but still holding an aura of defiance, as if they had been planted there against time itself. The largest one stood at the center, its top tilting slightly, like an ancient sentinel leaning forward to listen. I'd been here dozens of times before, studying the formations, measuring their alignments, but this time something was wrong. The central stone was marked. A faint, dark sheen spread across one side, and as I drew closer, I realized it wasn't a natural stain. It was wet, fresh. I reached out, my fingertips brushing the surface. It wasn't water, it was thicker, tacky, and cold. It left a residue on my skin that glistened faintly in the dim light, a shimmer like oil, but without a smell. As I wiped my hand on my coat, I heard the sound. It started low, so low I almost mistook it for the blood rushing in my ears. Then it grew, the deep hum rising from the base of the stone, vibrating upward, making the ground beneath my feet tremble ever so slightly. I stepped back, my breath catching. The sound wasn't coming from one stone. It was moving, circling the entire ring, passing from one to the next in sequence, faster and faster, until it became a continuous wave. The air around me thickened, as though the sound was pressing against my skin. Then I saw it. Between the stones, in the empty space where there should have been only open field, the air shimmered. Not like heat haze, this was sharper, a distortion, with edges, as though an invisible pane of glass were being bent. Within that shimmer, shapes began to form. At first they were vague, suggestions of figures that flickered in and out like an old film reel. Then they grew more defined, slender outlines standing unnaturally still. I couldn't see their faces, only the way their heads tilted toward me in perfect unison. My instinct screamed to run, but my feet wouldn't move. The hum deepened, and I felt it resonate in my teeth, in the hollow spaces of my skull. The tallest figure stepped forward, or maybe it didn't step at all. Maybe it just appeared closer. There was no motion, only change. My vision blurred around it, and for a moment I thought I could see the stars through its body, as though it were a window to the night sky, even though it was still dawn. A sudden flash, like lightning without. Thunder seared across my eyes. I staggered back, blinded, and when I could see again, the shimmer was gone. The stones stood silent and inert, as if nothing had happened. But the marks on the ground were still there, only now they formed a perfect spiral radiating outward from the center stone. And in the middle of that spiral lay something small. I stepped forward cautiously and saw that it was a smooth, black object, no bigger than a river stone. Its surface was impossibly polished, so much so that it reflected my face with unnatural clarity. I reached down, hesitating only for a moment, and picked it up. It was too warm for the cool morning air. As soon as my skin made contact, an image burned into my mind. Not a vision, not exactly, more like a memory that didn't belong to me. I saw a vast plain under a blood-red sky. Towers of stone, taller than mountains, rose in the distance, their tops lost in clouds that churned like boiling smoke. Between them, figures moved, not walking, but gliding, their bodies bending in ways that defied joints or bones. A sound accompanied the vision, the same hum from the stones, but now layered with a second tone, higher and sharper, weaving through the first like a question demanding an answer. The image vanished as quickly as it came, leaving me gasping. The black object still warm in my hand. I slipped it into my coat pocket without thinking. The air around the stones felt heavier now, oppressive, as though the ground itself was holding its breath. I turned to leave, but as I stepped away, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. High on the ridge that overlooked the field, a man stood watching me, or at least, I thought it was a man. He was too far away to see clearly, but his posture was rigid, his head tilted in the exact same way as the figures I had just seen in the shimmer. When I blinked, he was gone. The walk back to the village felt longer than it should have. The streets were still empty, though now I noticed faint signs of life shadows moving behind curtains. The creak of a floorboard inside a house. No one opened their doors. As I passed the well, I heard a soft splash, but when I looked, the water's surface was perfectly still, reflecting only the pale morning sky. By the time I reached my small rented room above the old inn, the black stone in my pocket had cooled. I placed it on the table, half expecting it to hum or pulse again, but it just sat there, inert and smooth. I should have been relieved, but instead I felt a strange pull, like the object was waiting for something. Or maybe it was waiting for me. I spent the rest of the day trying to distract myself, writing down what I had seen, comparing the spiral in the field to known archaeological patterns, even digging through my notes for anything that could explain the shimmer. But by evening, my concentration had crumbled. The stone seemed to be the center of gravity in the room, pulling my attention back again and again. It was well past midnight when the sound returned, faint at first, so faint I thought I was imagining it, but growing steadily louder. not outside in the stones, but in the room itself. I looked at the table. The black object was vibrating. Not enough to move, just enough to make the lamplight shimmer across its surface. I reached out, and the moment my fingers brushed it, the world dropped. Away. Away. I was standing in the same field, but it was night, and the sky above was unfamiliar. Thousands of stars I had never seen, arranged in constellations that made no sense. The standing stones glowed faintly, as though lit from within, and between them stood the figures. This time they were clear, no flickering, no distortion. Their bodies were impossibly tall and thin, their skin or whatever it was shimmering like liquid metal under moonlight. None of them moved, except for one, who stepped forward with a slowness that felt deliberate, ceremonial. It raised a hand, 5 long fingers, each joint bending twice, and pointed directly at me. I felt the hum rise until it was all I could hear, all I could feel. Then, in a voice that was not a voice, a thought pressed itself into my mind. We spoke. You listened. Now you will answer. The vision shattered, and I was back in my room, gasping for air, my hands trembling. The black stone lay on the table, perfectly still. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the shutters, but underneath the sound of the wind, I could still hear it, that deep, relentless hum, not fading, not stopping, and I knew it wouldn't stop, not until I answered.